The process of working a song out on the piano by ear can be pretty much broken down into 3 parts. Part 1 is to work out the scale in a song. Part 2 is to work out the chords in the scale. And part 3 is to therefore work out the chords in the song. If you can learn to do this, then you can learn to work out any song that you want to be able to play on the piano. So in today's video, I'm going to give you 3 things that you can do to start and get really good at going through this process and learning to play songs on the piano by ear. So let's get into it. Firstly, in order to be able to achieve the first step in the process, which is to learn the scale in a song, you have to be able to hear and find notes on the piano. Secondly, in order to be able to work out the scale and the chords in a scale, you need to know the scales and chords. And then thirdly, you need to go through working out a scale in a song, chords in a scale, and chords in a song lots of times so that you start recognizing patterns. So the first thing that you can do is to learn intervals and listen for intervals. Now, an interval is just a term that means the distance between 2 notes. So if I was to play a C and a D on the piano, this interval is described as a second. If I was to play a C and an E on the piano, this is a third. A C and an F is a fourth, a C and a G is a fifth, and so on. Being able to name the distance between these notes as a fourth, a fifth, a sixth, whatever it may be, is not actually the important part of being able to play by ear, although that does come in handy. The important reason to learn intervals is to start understanding the distances between notes. Because when you are listening to a piece of music, you want to start being able to recognize how far those notes are jumping from one to the next, and that will help you work out what the notes actually are. And when learning to play by ear, I would assess this in 3 different levels. Firstly, is the note higher or lower than the previous note? So if I hear this note in a song and I play on the piano this note, is my note lower or higher than the notes I can hear? In this case, the note that I played is lower than the note that I could hear. The second thing to think about is how near or far is that note? So compared to this note, how far away is this note? Is it really far in pitch, or is it quite close in pitch? And in this case, it doesn't sound really far away, like the note is down here, but it also doesn't sound right next to the note. And then the third level to consider is, what exact interval do I think it is? How many notes exactly do I think that my note is lower compared to the note that I'm listening to? And in this case, if this is the original note and this is my note, I think that we are probably 4 or 5 notes away. So if I then guess the notes again by moving up 4 or 5 notes, I am able to find the actual note that I was listening to. The reason that it's important to think in these kind of levels is because a lot of people, when listening to a song and trying to work out which notes they're listening to and find them on the piano, tend to move very quickly, and they go like this. And a lot of the time, people skip over the note that they're actually listening to. So if you want to be able to train the skill of finding notes that you're hearing, then it's important to put some method into what you're trying to do. So here's what you can do to practice and get good at this. Firstly, listen to a song that you like and pick a note that you want to try and find on the piano. Then play a random note on the piano. And if that note does not sound the same as the one that you're listening to, before trying a new note, think about whether that note is higher or lower than the one you're listening to, how far away it is, and then try and guess the amount of notes you've got to move. The good thing about learning to play by ear is that once you are able to find some notes that are in a song, then you can pretty much work out the rest of that song by using theory, and more specifically, scales and chords. So the second thing that you can do is learn the possible scales that you're going to hear, so that once you've found some notes, you can work out which scale those notes belong to. Now, essentially, a scale is a set of notes. Every song uses a scale to narrow down the amount of notes that you're going to be playing. In normal music, just to clarify what I mean by normal music, I mean typical Western music that doesn't involve using weird body parts to make noises or punching a cat to see what noise it makes. And on the piano, there are 12 possible notes. You have A, B, C, D, E, F, and G, and then you have 5 black notes that are in between those notes. These black notes can be called sharps or flats, and sharp just means one up from a key, and flat just means one down. So if I play an A, the black key that's one up from A is an A sharp, and if I play a D, the black key that is one down from a D is called a D flat. This means that each of the black keys has 2 names. It's called a sharp and it's called a flat. So a D sharp is also an E flat because D sharp is one up from D and E flat is one down from E. And out of these 12 notes, a scale narrows these 12 notes down to just 7 of them. So if you know which scale a song is using, then you are narrowing down the possible notes that are in that song. And the types of scales that you're going to see in about 99.9% of music are major and minor scales. The first scale that most people learn is the scale of C major because this just includes the white notes. So the 7 notes that scale uses are C, D, E, F, G, A, and B. This means that if you are working out a song by ear and you work out that it's using a C major scale, then you know that all of the chords and all of the melody in that song will only be using the white notes. And the interesting thing is there are only actually 12 major scales and 12 minor scales to learn. And each major scale is actually related to a minor scale, which means that they share the same notes. So the scale of C major, for example, which just has the white notes, and the scale of A minor share the same notes. So A minor also only uses the white notes. So it's the same notes, just starting in a different place. The way to work out which minor scale is related to which major scale is to start with the major scale and go down 3 half steps to find the minor scale. So from C, if we go down 3 half steps, we get to A. So C major and A minor are related. From G, if we go down 3 half steps, we get E. So G major and E minor are related and therefore share the same notes. A question that I often get asked is, if the major and the minor share the same notes, then what's the point in having 2 different scales? There is quite a few reasons, but one of the reasons that is most important for working songs out by ear is that sometimes in the minor scales, the 6th and 7th notes might be sharpened. And this is important to know if you are working out a song and it happens to use a minor scale, you might hear those 6th and 7th notes in the scale sharpened. So C major is all of the white notes, C, D, E, F, G, A, and B. And A minor is all the white notes, A, B, C, D, E, F, and G. But the F and the G, which is the 6th and 7th note in the scale, might be seen as an F sharp and a G sharp. For those that have never learned anything about scales before, that can be quite a lot of information to take in. So there is a link in the description to not only a cheat sheet that includes a list of all the scales so that you can go through and cross them off if you find a note that is not included in that scale, but it also includes nearly 30 pages of exercises that will help you learn everything that I've talked about in this video, including intervals, scales, how to work out a scale from a handful of notes, and everything else I'm about to talk about in this video. But here's something actionable that you can do to learn the scales. Pick 3 pairs of scales to learn this week. And I would always recommend starting with C major, G major, and D major. And not only would I learn those scales on the piano, but I would also work out what their relative minors are, and which notes in those relative minors are the 6th and 7th notes, and therefore might be sharpened. The third thing that you can do is to learn the possible chords. And there are 2 ways that you can do this. You can learn major and minor chords independent of a scale, so just learn all of the chords, or you can learn the chords as they relate to each scale. So first, let's deal with the first method. So this is just learning all of the major and minor chords independently. So the type of chord that make up all songs is a type of chord called a triad. And a triad is a 3-note chord. Now, a major triad, if we are working these out independently, we can work them out by working out the distance between each note in those chords. So if I want to play a C major triad, I can start with the note C, and then I can leave a gap of 3 half steps and play the next note, and then a gap of 2 half steps and play the next note. And this will give me a major triad, so a C major chord. And this will work with any key on the piano. If you play any key and leave a gap of 3 half steps, play the next note, then a gap of 2 half steps and play the next note, the resulting chord will be a major triad. And because there are 12 unique keys on the piano, there are 12 major chords that you can learn, one starting on each of those notes. And for minor triads, the gaps are the opposite. So for a C minor triad, we have a gap of 2 half steps, and then the next note, and then a gap of 3 half steps, and then play the next note. So this is a C minor triad. And once again, because there are 12 unique keys on the piano, you can learn the 12 minor triads. These triads are going to be what make up most of what you listen to in a song. And if you hear the note G in a song, for example, and you've worked that out using intervals, then the chord that is being played is going to include that G. And with any individual note on the piano, there is actually 6 triads that include that note. So for the note G, a C major chord includes the note G, a C minor chord includes the note G, an E flat major chord includes the note G, an E minor chord includes the note G, a G minor chord includes the note G, and a G major chord includes the note G. So that's 6 different triads that include that note G. Now personally, that is too many triads for me to try and work out in a song, which is why I think it's more important to work out triads as they relate to a scale. So if we go back to the scale of C major as our example, which is the notes C, D, E, F, G, A, and B, if I play every other note in that scale, I get a C major triad. If I play every other note in that scale, but starting on the second note of the scale, I get a D minor triad. If I play every other note in that scale starting on the third note, I get an E minor triad. On the fourth note, an F major triad. On the fifth note, a G major triad, and so on. If you know the scale that a song is using, then you also know the 7 possible triads that that song is using. Because you can play a triad starting on each of the 7 notes in the scale. And not only that, but if you've heard a G, for example, then there are only 3 triads that are in this scale that include the note G, and that is a C major triad, an E minor triad, and a G major triad. This means that there are a lot less possible chords that this song could now be using. If you learn the possible chords that you might see in a song, when you hear an individual note in that song, you can then easily work out which chords that song is using. And here is something actionable that you can do in order to learn them. Pick a random note on the piano and try and work out which 6 major and minor triads use that individual note. Then I would pick a scale that includes your note. So for example, if your note is G, then you could pick a C major scale because there is a G in a C major scale, and try and work out in that scale which 3 triads include your note. The 3-step process to working out a song by ear, which is to work out the scale of a song, to work out the chords in that scale, and then to work out the chords in that song, becomes an incredibly quick process if you know all of your chords, you know all of your scales, and you're able to hear notes in a piece of music and compare them to each other and to notes that you are playing on the piano. So if you want to practice this and learn the scales and chords and have the cheat sheet, then feel free to check out the link in the description. And if you want to know what I would do if I started the piano all over again, then head on through and I will see you there.